Rome, a city that began as a small cluster of huts on a marshy riverbank and grew to rule the known world. This is the story of the Eternal City. In the beginning, there were only hills and a river, but according to legend, its origins were far more divine and far more violent. The legend of Romulus and Remus, twin brothers raised by a wolf, who fought over the very site where the city would stand. Romulus would prevail. For 2.5 centuries, Rome was ruled by kings. They built the first temples, the first walls, and the foundations of Roman religion and law. But in 509 BC, the last king was expelled. Rome became a republic, a state governed not by kings, but by its citizens and the Senate. Senatus Populusque Romanus, the Senate and the people of Rome. A unique system of checks and balances that would last for nearly 500 years. With the Republic came an army of citizen soldiers, rhythmic, disciplined, and determined to expand the influence of the fledgling state. Rome had secured its hills, but soon it would look across the sea and face an enemy that would test the Republic to its very core: Carthage. Rome had secured Italy, but to the south lay a rival of immense power and ancient wealth: Carthage. The struggle for the Mediterranean was about to begin. Carthage was a seafaring giant, a former Phoenician colony that ruled the waves. For Rome to prevail, it would have to learn to fight and win at sea. In the First Punic War, Rome built a fleet from scratch, inventing the corvus, a boarding bridge that turned naval battles into land fights on the water. But it was the Second Punic War that brought Rome to the brink. Hannibal Barca, the Carthaginian genius, led his army, including elephants, across the impossible heights of the Alps. At Cannae, Hannibal delivered Rome's greatest defeat, trapping and destroying an entire army. For a moment, the Eternal City stood alone and vulnerable. Rome refused to surrender. They raised new legions and found their own genius, Scipio Africanus, who took the fight across the sea to the gates of Carthage itself. At Zama, the two greatest commanders of the age met. Scipio's discipline broke Hannibal's elephants, and Carthage was finally brought to its knees. Carthage was destroyed, and Rome was now the undisputed master of the Mediterranean. But the cost of empire would soon tear the Republic apart from within. Rome was now a superpower, but the wealth of conquest brought deep inequality and political violence. The Republic was beginning to fracture from within. From this chaos emerged Julius Caesar, a brilliant general who conquered Gaul, winning the total devotion of his legions and the fear of his rivals in the Senate. In 49 BC, Caesar made a fateful choice. He crossed the Rubicon River with his army, an act of civil war. "The die is cast," he reportedly said. Caesar marched on Rome and seized power as dictator. He launched ambitious reforms, but his absolute control became a death sentence for the old republic. A group of senators, led by Brutus and Cassius, feared he would crown himself king. They formed a deadly conspiracy to save the republic. On the Ides of March, 44 BC, they struck. Caesar was assassinated on the Senate floor, but instead of saving the republic, they had guaranteed its end. Caesar's death sparked a new cycle of civil wars. From the ashes would rise his heir, Octavian, and a new era, the Roman Empire. The Republic was gone. In its place stood an empire that would bring peace and order to the Mediterranean for centuries. The age of Augustus was dawning. From the ashes of civil war rose a new order. Augustus, the first emperor, brought a period of relative peace and stability that would last for 2 centuries, the Pax Romana. Rome became a city of marble. Emperors competed to build grander forums, baths, and the greatest amphitheater of all, the Flavian Amphitheater, known as the Colosseum. Engineering was the backbone of empire. Aqueducts carried fresh water for miles, while a vast network of paved roads connected the most distant provinces to the capital. In this era, Rome reached its peak of wealth. For the elite, life was a display of luxury and culture, while for the masses, the state provided bread and circuses. The games were a tool of control. Chariot races and gladiatorial contests kept the people entertained and the power of the emperor absolute. But Rome was more than just games. It was a center of law, philosophy, and architectural genius that would set the standard for Western civilization. By the 2nd century AD, the empire stretched from the rain-soaked hills of Britain to the scorching deserts of Arabia. It seemed it would last forever, but even the greatest empires faced their limits. Soon, pressure on the borders and internal corruption would test the strength of the Eternal City as never before. For 2 centuries, the Pax Romana held. But in the 3rd century AD, the empire began to unravel, a period of near collapse that tested the very survival of Rome. The era of the barracks emperors had begun. Civil war became the norm as dozens of generals claimed the throne, only to be assassinated by their own men. The economy shattered. To pay the armies, emperors debased the currency, leading to hyperinflation. Trade ground to a halt, and the cities began to hollow out. On the borders, the pressure was relentless. Germanic tribes and the Sassanid Persians pushed into Roman territory, finding the once mighty frontiers weakened and divided. To save the state, a radical hand was needed. In 284 AD, Diocletian seized power and realized the empire was simply too large for one man to rule. He created the Tetrarchy, the rule of 4. 2 senior emperors and 2 juniors, each responsible for a different quadrant of the Roman world. Order was restored, but the split was deep. Diocletian saved the empire, but the peace of the 4 rulers would not last. From the next civil war would emerge a man who would change the world's faith forever: Constantine. Out of the chaos of the Tetrarchy rose one man who would redefine Rome: Constantine, a general who claimed a divine vision would lead him to victory. In 312 AD, at the Battle of the Milvian Bridge, Constantine defeated his rival. He attributed his success to the Christian God, placing the Chi-Rho on his soldiers' shields. The Edict of Milan followed, legalizing Christianity. What was once a persecuted sect began its journey to becoming the state religion of the empire. Constantine moved the capital from Rome to the ancient city of Byzantium, which he rebuilt as a new Rome. It would be known forever as Constantinople. Strategically located between East and West, Constantinople became the most fortified and wealthy city in Christendom, the heart of an empire that would endure for a millennium. The faith of the empire had changed, and with it, its architecture. Grand basilicas replaced old temples, reflecting the new spiritual order of the Roman world. Constantine unified the empire one last time, but the division between the Latin West and the Greek East was growing. Soon, the West would face its final test. The division of the empire was final. While the East flourished, the West faced a steady decline of authority, economy, and military power. In 410 AD, for the first time in 800 years, an enemy entered Rome. The Goths, led by Alaric, sacked the city, a shock that reverberated across the known world. Worse was to come. In 455 AD, the Vandals sacked Rome again, stripping the city of its remaining gold and marble. The heart of the West was being hollowed out. The final blow came not with a bang, but with a quiet abdication. The title of emperor had become a hollow prize, held by children and figureheads. In 476 AD, the last Western emperor, a boy named Romulus Augustulus, was deposed by the Germanic general Odoacer. The Western line of emperors was over. The light of Rome flickered out in the West, replaced by a mosaic of Germanic kingdoms. But in the East, the empire would endure for another 1,000 years. Rome fell, but its spirit did not. Its laws, its language, and its faith would become the foundation of the modern world. The legacy of the Eternal City is our own. While the city-states fought, power shifted north. Macedonia was a kingdom regarded with condescension, until Philip II came to power in 359 BC. Philip transformed his kingdom with remarkable speed. He reformed the army, introducing a new type of infantry formation based on the sarissa. The sarissa was far longer than the standard Greek spear. Combined with powerful cavalry, it created a flexible and highly effective military system. Philip was also an exceptionally skilled diplomat, using negotiation, bribery, and strategic marriage alongside military force. He expanded systematically. The Athenian orator Demosthenes delivered speeches warning of the threat and urging resistance. His warnings went largely unheeded until too late. In 338 BC, at the Battle of Chaeronea, Philip's army defeated the coalition. The era of the fully independent polis was effectively over. Philip announced plans for a crusade against Persia, but in 336 BC, he was assassinated at his daughter's wedding. He left behind a professional army and a 20-year-old son. Alexander III of Macedon had been educated by Aristotle and trained in warfare by his father. The world was about to change. Alexander III of Macedon was a student of Aristotle and a commander at 18. When Philip was killed, Alexander moved quickly to reassert control. In 334 BC, he crossed the Hellespont into Asia with 40,000 men. What followed was one of the most extensive military campaigns in history. At the Battle of Issus, Alexander's aggressive central thrust broke the Persian line and sent the great King Darius III fleeing, leaving behind his treasury and camp. He was recognized as pharaoh in Egypt and founded Alexandria, one of more than 20 cities he would name after himself, centers of culture and learning. In 331 BC, at the Battle of Gaugamela, he effectively ended the Persian Empire. He took the capitals of Persepolis and Susa, burning the great palace of Persepolis. He pushed further east into Pakistan, fighting King Porus at the Battle of the Hydaspes, a hard-fought engagement against war elephants that Alexander eventually won. But on the banks of the Hyphasis, his army refused to go further. They had been fighting for nearly a decade, thousands of miles from home. Alexander conceded. He turned west but never reached Greece. In June of 323 BC in Babylon, Alexander died of a fever. He was only 32 years old. When asked to whom he left his empire, he said, "To the strongest." It was an answer that guaranteed conflict and birthed a new era, the Hellenistic world. Alexander's generals spent decades fighting over his empire. By 275 BC, major kingdoms had stabilized. This was the Hellenistic age. Greek became the common language from Egypt to Bactria. Greek-style cities, with agoras and theaters, were founded across the Middle East. In Alexandria, the Great Library assembled a comprehensive collection of all texts. The intellectual achievements of this period were considerable. Euclid systematized geometry. Archimedes worked out mechanics. Eratosthenes calculated the Earth's circumference with impressive accuracy. One by one, the Hellenistic kingdoms fell to Rome. Egypt was the last, absorbed in 30 BC. But Roman conquest did not end Greek influence. Roman culture was profoundly shaped by Greek models. They absorbed Greek mythology, philosophy, and architecture into their own expanding empire. Ancient Greece was not a paradise. It was built on slave labor and excluded women. But it produced a set of questions that changed history. The idea that the natural world operates on principles reason can discover, that political arrangements should be justifiable, that careful inquiry is valuable. The ancient Greek world ended, but its questions did not. They are still being asked, worked on, and argued over in public squares today. Let me know what period you'd like to explore next in the comments. Subscribe to stay with us as we continue the great stories of human history. Behind the emperors and the legions were the people of Rome. 1 million souls packed into a bustling metropolis that never truly slept. The streets were a chaotic mix of patricians in fine togas and plebeians working the markets. It was a city defined by strict social classes, but united by Roman identity. Public life centered around the baths. These grand complexes were not just for hygiene, they were the social clubs, libraries, and networking hubs of the ancient world. The economy was fueled by vast networks of trade. Goods from across the known world, grain from Egypt, silk from China, and spices from India filled the markets. At home, the paterfamilias held absolute power. While the poor lived in crowded, dangerous apartments called insulae, the wealthy enjoyed sprawling villas with elaborate frescoes. Every aspect of life was intertwined with the gods. From state ceremonies to quiet household shrines, honoring the pantheon was essential for the safety of Rome. It was a complex, vibrant society that laid the groundwork for modern urban living. But this incredible way of life could not last forever. The true strength of Rome lay not in its walls, but in its legions. A professional, highly disciplined force that was the most advanced war machine of the ancient world. Every soldier was an investment. From the standardized plate armor to the short sword designed for close quarters efficiency, the legionaries' gear was a masterpiece of military engineering. The camp was a city in itself. Every night, the legions built a fortified castrum, complete with defensive walls and towers, ensuring they were never vulnerable to surprise. In battle, their tactics were revolutionary. The testudo formation allowed them to advance under heavy fire, a mobile fortress that could break through any defensive line. Siege warfare was their specialty. Using ballistae and onagers, they could rain destruction from a distance, proving that no wall could resist the weight of Roman engineering. The legions conquered the world, but the city they served required a different kind of power, the power of the spectacle. Next, we enter the arena. To understand Rome, one must understand its obsession with the arena. The Colosseum was not just a building, it was a microcosm of the empire itself. Beneath the arena floor lay the hypogum, a complex system of tunnels, cages, and elevators that allowed scenery, animals, and men to appear as if by magic. For the gladiators, that light meant a fight for survival. Mostly slaves, prisoners, or volunteers seeking glory, they were highly trained athletes whose lives were incredibly valuable. Combat was brutal but rarely fought to the death without the emperor's consent. It was a highly regulated sport, designed to demonstrate Roman martial virtues to the masses. The game served a political purpose. Here, the emperor met the people. It was a controlled display of power, life, death, and imperial generosity. The games ended, the empire fell, and the temples crumbled. But the story of the Eternal City is far from over. Look around you today. In our laws, our engineering, our languages, and our architecture, Rome continues to govern. The empire of the sword is gone. The empire of the mind remains eternal. Thank you for joining me on this journey through ancient Rome. Let me know in the comments which era of history we should explore next, and don't forget to subscribe.